Have you ever felt like your kindness backfired? Maybe you stayed late to help a coworker who later took credit, or forgave someone, again, only to be hurt the same way twice. You tell yourself you're doing the right thing, being the bigger person. But deep down, something feels off. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Kindness in the wrong context doesn't earn you respect, it invites exploitation. This isn't just a modern problem. Over 500 years ago, Niccolò Machiavelli saw it play out in the brutal world of politics. His conclusion? Harsh, but revealing. Those who lead with kindness without strength get destroyed. In this episode, we're going to explore what Machiavelli really meant when he warned against being too good. Not because he wanted us to become cruel, but because he wanted us to stop being naive. So before you offer help to someone who wouldn't do the same for you, ask yourself, is your kindness a strength or a trap? Let's break it down. When you hear the name Machiavelli, you probably think of manipulation, cold strategy, maybe even evil. Machiavellian has become a label for schemers and villains, but the real Niccolò Machiavelli, he was far more complex and misunderstood. Born in 1469 in Florence, Italy, Machiavelli lived through one of the most chaotic periods in European history. Florence was caught in constant power struggles between noble families, foreign invaders, and the church. Political betrayal was the norm. Empires rose and fell overnight. Stability was a fantasy. Machiavelli wasn't a prince or tyrant, he was a civil servant, a diplomat, a man in the middle of the storm. And what he saw disturbed him. The idealists got crushed. The overly kind were used and discarded. The winners, they were ruthless but not reckless. They understood human nature, they were strategic. After losing his position in a political shake-up, Machiavelli wrote The Prince, a brutally honest guide to power. He wasn't promoting cruelty, he was describing reality, stripped of illusion. To him, morality was a luxury leaders couldn't always afford. If you wanted to survive and protect your people, you had to be willing to do what others wouldn't, including saying no, showing strength, and sometimes not being kind. He wasn't against goodness, he was against unwise goodness. Understanding this is key because it turns Machiavelli from a villain into a truth-teller. Machiavelli's core message wasn't that kindness is bad, it's that kindness without strategy is dangerous. In The Prince he writes, "It is much safer to be feared than loved if one must choose." Why? Because love is conditional, it's fragile. People are loyal as long as it benefits them. But fear is reliable. Fear makes people think twice. This sounds harsh until you look at real life. Time and time again, those who lead with unguarded kindness, whether in politics, business, or relationships, get taken advantage of. They're expected to say yes, to forgive endlessly, to carry the emotional weight for others. And the worst part? The more kind they are, the less they're respected. That's the trap. People assume kindness means softness, and softness in a competitive world signals vulnerability. It's a silent invitation to be used. Machiavelli saw this clearly in the bloody politics of Renaissance Italy. He watched generous rulers overthrown by the very people they tried to please. He watched alliances break, not out of necessity, but out of opportunism. His warning wasn't just for princes, it was for anyone who thought virtue alone was enough to survive. Machiavelli believed that power and survival required a clear-eyed view of human nature. You could be kind, but only when it served a purpose. Because in a world where not everyone plays fair, being too good can be the most dangerous thing you do. Kindness, in his eyes, had to be backed by strength, discernment, and the courage to say no. Without that, you're not being good, you're being prey. Machiavelli didn't believe people were evil, but he did believe they were self-interested, deeply, consistently, and often quietly. To him, human nature wasn't noble or idealistic. It was practical, unpredictable, and opportunistic. People would appear loyal when it benefited them, kind when it earned them favor, and honest when there was no better option, but give them a chance to betray you for gain. Many would take it without hesitation. In The Prince, Machiavelli argues that leaders must build their strategies not around how people should behave, but around how they do. Hope is not a strategy. Power requires realism. One of his most famous lines captures this cold clarity. Men are quick to change rulers when they imagine they can better their condition. In other words, loyalty is shallow when ambition is at play. This isn't cynicism, it's pattern recognition. This view doesn't just apply to rulers, it applies to anyone who assumes good intentions without limits. Machiavelli's lesson was clear. Never mistake politeness for loyalty or silence for agreement. People follow strength, they test boundaries, and they often prioritize their gain over your goodwill. He wasn't saying trust no one, he was saying trust with eyes open. Reward loyalty, but don't expect it blindly. Offer kindness, but don't let it become currency others can spend freely. In Machiavelli's world, and ours, underestimating human self-interest is the fastest way to lose power, respect, and peace of mind. Because people are not always cruel, but they are always human. Modern examples: how kindness gets exploited today. Machiavelli's ideas weren't just for kings and politicians. They apply just as much to modern life, especially now in a world where being nice is often expected, but rarely protected. Let's break it down. Workplace: the over-accommodating employee. You show up early, stay late, say yes to every request. At first people thank you, eventually they expect it. You become the default fixer. Promotions: they go to louder voices. Respect: it fades. You weren't rewarded for your kindness. You were used because you never pushed back. Relationships: the emotional giver. You listen, forgive, sacrifice. You believe in second chances, maybe fifth ones too. But some people don't grow. They manipulate. They treat your compassion as permission. You confuse patience with loyalty. Meanwhile, they keep taking, because they know you won't leave. Friendships and social circles. You always check in, you make plans, you support others' dreams. But when you need support, silence. People take your energy but never give it back. Your kindness becomes background noise, expected but not valued. Online spaces and social media. You try to stay kind, respectful, neutral. But silence is often seen as weakness or guilt. Trolls, critics, and bad faith actors push harder because they know you won't fight back. The more careful you are, the more aggressively you're tested. Helping without boundaries. You lend money, offer time, give advice, and then you're drained. You feel guilty for setting limits because you were taught that being a good person means never saying no. But this isn't kindness, it's self-erasure. In all these cases, the common thread is this: kindness without boundaries invites exploitation. People don't always respond to goodness with gratitude. They often respond with opportunism. And unless you're willing to draw lines, your kindness will be taken, not appreciated. This doesn't mean you should be cruel, it means you should be clear. In a world that's quick to take, strength protects your ability to give on your own terms. One of the biggest traps people fall into is confusing being good with being agreeable. We're taught from a young age, be nice, don't make waves, always help. But somewhere along the way, that message gets twisted into, don't say no, don't have needs and never upset anyone. That's not goodness, that's self-abandonment. Machiavelli saw this clearly. In his world, leaders who tried to be universally liked were seen as weak, and weakness was an invitation to rebellion. The same applies today, in a less violent but equally manipulative world. When people sense you won't protect your boundaries, they begin to shape you for their benefit. You think you're being kind, but what you're really being is compliant. You think you're being moral, but you're actually afraid of conflict. You think you're being strong, but you're just swallowing discomfort over and over again. True goodness doesn't mean allowing disrespect. It doesn't mean sacrificing your values just to keep the peace. Real kindness has a backbone. Being a good person should never mean being a passive one. You can be firm and fair. You can say no and still care. You can challenge someone and still be kind. Machiavelli's warning wasn't to stop being good. It was to stop being naively good. Because when goodness becomes automatic, uncritical, or performative, it loses its meaning. Worse, it becomes a tool that others use to control you. You don't owe the world blind kindness. You owe it clarity, courage, and conscience, and that's what being truly good looks like. Machiavelli's most quoted and most misunderstood line is this: "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." People take that to mean he was promoting cruelty, but that's not what he was saying. Machiavelli wasn't anti-love, he was anti-illusion. He believed that love alone, without authority or consequences, was unstable. People might love you today, but love can vanish when circumstances change. Fear, on the other hand, a respectful fear, creates consistency. Let's be clear, he wasn't endorsing tyranny. He warned against being hated. He even said a ruler should avoid cruelty if possible. What he actually promoted was control, stability, and clear limits. To Machiavelli, the ideal leader was both feared and loved, but if forced to choose, fear was more reliable. Why? Because fear doesn't rely on people's moods. It doesn't fade when you're no longer useful, or when someone else becomes more likable. Now apply that to real life. A leader who is liked but never respected gets ignored. A partner who is loving but never asserts themselves gets walked on. A friend who always says yes eventually gets taken for granted. Machiavelli's point was this: love is powerful, but only when paired with strength. When people know you are kind and not to be messed with, that's when real trust forms. That's when your words carry weight. So the goal isn't to abandon kindness, it's to anchor it in firmness. Let people love you, but let them know your boundaries are real, because love without limits fades, but love that respects strength, that endures. Kindness is powerful, but only when it's intentional. Machiavelli didn't reject kindness altogether. He simply believed it should be used strategically, not given out automatically. In his eyes, kindness without timing or discernment was a liability, but kindness offered with strength, that was influence. So when should you be kind? Be kind when it builds loyalty without costing your authority. Be kind when someone has earned trust, not just when they demand it. Be kind when it aligns with your values, not when it compromises them. Be kind when it serves a long-term relationship or goal, not a short-term emotional fix. And just as importantly, here's when not to be kind. Don't be kind when it's used to manipulate you into guilt or compliance. Don't be kind when someone crosses a line and expects no consequences. Don't be kind when it protects someone else's comfort at the expense of your well-being. Don't be kind when your silence enables injustice, abuse, or disrespect. This doesn't mean becoming cold or aggressive. It means becoming conscious. It means choosing kindness because it serves a purpose, not because you're afraid of confrontation. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is say no. Sometimes it's walking away. Sometimes it's letting someone face the results of their own actions. That's not cruelty. That's integrity. Machiavelli understood that power without mercy is tyranny, but mercy without strength, that's weakness. The art is in knowing when each is appropriate, so be kind but be precise. Let your kindness be a gift, not a given. So how do you protect your kindness without becoming cold or cynical? Here's a simple mindset shift. Kindness isn't who you are, it's what you choose. And choice requires clarity, not guilt. Let's call this the Empowered Kindness Framework. It has 3 key principles. First, kindness with boundaries. If your kindness doesn't include the word no, it isn't real. It's just people-pleasing. Say no without over-explaining. Protect your time, energy, and emotional bandwidth. You can care without collapsing. Second, kindness with discernment. Not everyone deserves the same version of you. Be generous but observe. Do they take without giving? Do they expect more when you've already given enough? Do they guilt you into silence or compliance? Use kindness as a mirror, not a mask. Third, kindness with strength. Kindness is not weakness, it's control. It says, I have the power to hurt, but I won't. But it also says, I won't let you hurt me either. Lead with grace, but hold your ground. That balance, compassion with courage, is where real respect lives. In the end, empowered kindness is about owning your voice, your values, and your limits. It's not about being liked, it's about being clear. Because when you're clear, your kindness is no longer a currency others trade on. It becomes a conscious act of strength, and that's exactly what Machiavelli would have respected. Kindness is not the problem. Naivety is. Machiavelli never told us to abandon kindness. He warned us not to confuse it with weakness. In his world, and in ours, those who are blindly good often get quietly destroyed. We're told to be nice, forgiving, understanding. But if we don't pair that with awareness, strength, and self-respect, our goodness becomes a tool others use against us. The goal isn't to become hard or heartless. The goal is to become wise. Kindness is still one of the most powerful forces you can carry, but only when it's chosen, not demanded. When it's backed by standards, not just feelings. When it's part of a bigger picture, not your entire identity. So here's the challenge. Be kind, but not at your own expense. Be helpful, but not to your own harm. Be forgiving, but not forgetful of patterns. Machiavelli's greatest lesson wasn't about fear or manipulation. It was about seeing the world as it really is, not as we wish it were. When you do that, your kindness becomes smarter, sharper, stronger. You're no longer being good out of fear, guilt, or habit. You're being good on your own terms. That's not weakness, that's power.